Welcome to a new Daily Top Askreddit video. Today's topic.
Who are some people you know personally, or otherwise, who ruined their own lives, and how? Staying in bad relationships, doubling down and marrying and having children. Now they have the same relationship problems that they had 10 years ago. But with children involved. Literally my first thought. Poor kids. Ugh, literally my parents. They finally divorced when I was 25. Like you couldn't have done it a lot sooner. Nah, let's ride this out until the damage is really ingrained into our children. Tears of joy, tears of joy, tears of joy. Edit. Removed a detail that I had misremembered about when I left their household. Mine didn't divorce. And now that my sister and I are both out of the house, they're really tight and nice to each other. What the hell, really? A buddy from high school blew through a stop sign and hit a couple of motorcyclists, killing them both. He didn't stop to render aid and fled the scene. He was busted for vehicular manslaughter, and spent 12 plus years in prison. He's lucky he can work for his dad, because where he lives now is not kind to felons trying to rehabilitate. Left him to die. Sounds like a real winner. Probably panicked. I mean, yes, absolutely a completely shit thing to do. But also, making poor decisions in the moment when something terrible and unexpected happens is pretty common. It's why we have fire drills and stuff like that. It's the not stopping at a stop sign in the first place that is really telling. Because that's a routine and basic rule. No reason not to stop except pure arrogance about road rules not applying to them. This is why I dislike careless, selfish drivers. They're one bad luck incident away from maiming or death, but they don't believe it and often get angry at anyone who wants them to be careful. Meth. Less than 6 months between getting into it and the police pulling his body out of river. Had a buddy who got scouted by professional baseball when we were in high school. They wanted him in the farm system, his mom wanted him in college. So the team allowed it. Dude found meth before leaving for college. He never made it there. He's now homeless and on his last legs. My uncle was a star baseball player in high school. Got scouted by the Oakland A's, who then invited him to a tryout. Some girl he liked said she'd go out with him, so he just bailed and didn't go to the tryout. He figured he was so good there would be plenty of opportunities. No more scouts. Just that single date with the girl who then blew him off. He spent his entire life working in fast food restaurants and intermittently hooked on drugs of one kind of another. One failed marriage in his 40s. No kids. Died single and alone. No one found him for 3 days in his trailer. Talked about his one shot all throughout his life like they had screwed him out of fame and fortune. Because he was too good for the game. Just a truly sad person. Jesus, that's awful. My Bill isn't dead, but on meth. He is just stealing everything my stepfather owns and selling it. Even stole his daughter's Switch and sold it. They always talk about things going missing. I'm like, it's not missing. Dude sold it for drug money. I helped an old friend of my mother-in-law for some time. She was in recovery for some years. She had drank so heavily for so long she developed a neurological disorder which left her debilitated. She gradually lost her balance, her motor skills and coordination, and is now hospitalized and unable to care for herself. She is almost a decade younger than me and her life of independence is over. She will remain bedridden and rely on others for her most basic needs for the remaining years of her life. This is neither far-fetched nor the worst-case scenario. People die from addiction every day. Edited. My 5-year no alcohol mark was this last Tuesday. I'm so glad I quit drinking before it became too late. Congrats. I'm right at 2.5 years right now. And it might be morbid, but stories like that poor woman's are what keep me sober. There, but for the grace of God go I. Maybe it's just me, but that sounds worse than death. It depends on how coherent they are. Watching them do it, from the outside, it's worse than death. But for the person I know, he's not really cognizant of how, from my perspective, how shit his life is. 3 years younger than me. He was a tow truck driver, making about $1 minus $2,000 plus a week. Lots of people offer drugs and other favors to get a deal. Got addicted to drugs. Graduated to Fent. Lost that job. Lost about 5 jobs in the span of a few months when I was trying to help him. Crashed his car. Ran out of money. Started stealing duster from Walmart. Ended up in jail. Last I heard from him. Pretty sure he destroyed his brain and just exists to chase the next high. He doesn't seem to really comprehend how far he's fallen. I used to hang out with a guy who was one of those super friendly, talkative, gets along with everyone to a fault kind of guys. I will call him Jack. Jack was the kind of guy who would order 3 drinks and 3 shots right before happy hour ended and then would proceed to down all 3 shots and chug 2 of the drinks. He was never really at home unless he was throwing a party. So his entire diet consisted of alcohol, weed and takeout. Then one day Jack collapsed and was taken to the hospital. Turns out his kidneys were shutting down. He had been taking antacids constantly and so often that it just wrecked his kidneys. They had to put him into a medically induced coma and he was in the hospital for months. When Jack got out and we started seeing him out and about, he would still have the occasional drink. But gone were the days of ordering so many right at the end of happy hour. He didn't care about the price of the drink because he only ever had one or two. One thing he realized was that he had been spending a small fortune on booze. He could spend a quarter of that on weed and have a shit ton of weed. That became his new vice. That would have been fine. He was still the same guy he was before. Then Jack started going harder. It didn't take long for him to develop a very hardcore coke habit. To the point that he was financially ruining himself. He was hiding vials in the bathroom ceiling at the bar and other places. He descended into a very bad place. All of us tried at multiple points to intervene and go something. Anything. He refused to listen or acknowledge. One by one, people turned away from him. The last time I saw Jack, he was cocked out of his mind at the bar and came up and tried to talk to me. We hadn't talked in months. After a minute of rambling, I just asked him what happened to him. He asked what I meant and I told him, "Man, you were great and people loved hanging with you. Not everything about you revolves around your next line. What happened, man?" I wasn't upset, mad or accusatory. I was sad. He got upset and walked away from me. I never really saw him after that. I hadn't been hanging out at that bar as much as I used to. I would hear about him here. Stories about how he was kicked out of and banned from every bar in the area. See, he was still very much into the coke. But he offset that by starting to drink heavily again and say and do shit that just wasn't acceptable. Then one night a couple years later, I ran into some of the guys that were part of that crew from back in the day. We were talking and catching up. One of them had kept in touch with Jack and was telling us about how Jack had finally started to turn his life around. He was offered a good job in a town across the state that he started earlier that week. All of us agreed that was great. A fresh start in a new place might be good for him. And then he told us the rest of the story. On his first day, Jack called in and told them he needed a vacation day and gave them a blatantly false story. I shook my head and said, "Okay, that sounds more like the Jack I remember." The next night I was at a bar watching football and the guy who had kept in touch with Jack came in and asked me if I had heard. Jack was found dead in his apartment. We found out later that his health problems never really went away. The day he died, he was at a doctor appointment where he was told that he didn't have more than a year left. The amount of damage done to his body just simply could not be fixed, and the time to do something about it had passed by a couple years. No one is 100% certain about what happened next, but it appears he stopped at a liquor store on his way home, bought a shitload of booze and then went home and proceeded to drink himself to death. I know this is completely off topic, but I really like your way of writing. I don't know if this is something you do regularly, as a hobby, or even professionally, but I wanted to point it out. I also read your post about your mom. I hope your relationship has improved since then. Thank you. I feel like sometimes it comes off as rambling, but I do try and do some kind of reread to make sure it doesn't come off as incoherent. I also read your post about your mom. I hope your relationship has improved since then. It did not. She died a couple years ago and the last conversation I had with her did not go well. I found out some lies that she had told me over the course of my life that quite literally made me rethink everything about my past, and when I confronted her with that, she denied. It is what it is, and I came to terms with the lack of closure. PHSA. Just a side note here. Everyone should be more aware that heavy cannabis use over years often causes the stomach issues. In particular, the overproduction of stomach acid that gets worse over time. To make matters worse, most doctors, all 5 that I saw anyways, speaking from experience, will recommend antacids or stomach acid inhibitor pills. These makes the medical condition way worse, as it starts a negative feedback loop where the stomach produces even more acid to offset the medication. This is huge medical issue with cannabis that most are not aware of, so wanted to put this out there. It took me literally a decade of stomach issues and wrong doctors before I finally figured out it was the cannabis that was the issue. This is related to CHS, cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. Back then I had daily stomach pains and issues, and the medications made it worse. As a non-smoker now, and cutting out soda from my diet, my issues are pretty much gone.